Hey guys, it's Boris, and I want to introduce you to the system that we day trade in our chat room live every single day called Bounce. I'm going to give you the basic ideas behind it and what makes it such a profitable and interesting system. And then also hopefully induce you to come and trade with me live, because really to fully understand and to fully integrate exactly how this thing works, you really got to see me do it day in and day out. Basically, Bounce is a mean reversion strategy. We sell highs, buy lows. Now that's not the only thing we do. When you come into the room, you'll see that we actually do a lot of interesting continuation trades as well. But for the purposes of this video, the simplest core concept of bounce is exactly that. You're bouncing off the bottom, you're bouncing off the top. So it's a mean reversion strategy. We trade it on a 1 minute chart across a variety of instruments, but really primarily US indices. That's really where this particular strategy shines. But it can be traded on gold, it can be traded on oil, it can even be traded on crypto. Although I will say that on oil, crypto, and gold, which we consider to be commodities, we actually trade that on a 5 minute chart rather than a 1 minute chart. But for the core concept, it's a 1 minute mean reversion strategy that trades mainly indices. And the way it works is sort of very simple. We have a proprietary bounce indicator in TradingView, something that you would get when you join me in my trading room. And there's a separate video that I show you exactly how to construct it and how to actually read that indicator. So please watch it. But for purposes here, basically, as you can see, we look for a couple of conditions. The chart being at the highs, the conditions to be oversold or overbought, excuse me, with the green chart indicating that there's overbought conditions, and then we need a red candle. All of those things have to come together in order for a bounce signal to trigger. And here you would have a sell trigger. In this particular chart, you would have the buy trigger off the bottom. So it's a reverse kind of idea where you have the bottom, you have oversold conditions with a red stripe across the chart showing you that, and then you need a green candle as your trigger candle. And this is the candle that you would trigger off to go buying. So very, very simple in its concept, but it has quite a lot of interesting quantitative work behind it. All of this pretty little charts is really working lots of different indicators to give you the best possible entries. But a thing that makes Bounce unique and completely different from, I think, anything that you've ever been introduced to as far as trading is that we don't trade in single trade increments. What I mean by that is typically most people say, oh, you know, we're going to do this trade. If we stop ourselves out, that's it, we're done. We don't quit on a stop. We trade continuously into a trade cycle. What I mean by that is, let me give you an example. If we get stopped out, we look for the trade conditions to repeat themselves. Now, we don't just go in blindly. We obviously have to have the exact same setup occur again. If the setup occurs again, we go second time at 2 units. We get stopped out. We go third time at 4 units. We get stopped out. We go fourth time at 8 units. This is a very interesting, but also clearly a challenging strategy for those of you who are not who are new to this, because it really requires quite a lot of conviction in statistics, in faith, in understanding how quantitative finance really works and how the odds really go in your favor on a long-term kind of an actuarial basis. Bottom line is we go through not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but all the way up to 8 levels, which means that if we start with one single unit, our final trade cycle is 128 units large. That's an enormously wide. We're basically going 100 times larger on our last trade than we do on our first trade. And that certainly requires quite a lot of understanding of mathematics. So to sort of understand the basic ideas of this, if you just sort of assume a perfect distribution and that we have a 50-50 chance of winning on any given trade. In other words, we don't have any edge. In other words, that none of our analytics amount to anything, to a hill of beans. It's basically luck. Every time we're entering the trade at luck, even if you just sort of assume pure luck, you can see that on this type of a progression, in terms of, you know, multiplying 1.5, 8 times, the probability of 8 consecutive stops is less than 1/2 of 1%, actually 51 basis points, right? So it's a, the idea that even if you were lucky and you just did this, 8 times, you're very likely going to resolve it just by statistical error. But if you, on the other hand, have an edge, if you actually think that the bounce indicator, which we certainly not only believe, but obviously have proven many, many times, is more than a 50-50 trade, is in fact really close to a 60-40 trade, but let's just even assume a 55-40 trade, then the odds of you losing become infinitesimally small. They literally go down to like 16 times out of 1,000 tries. It's a much, much smaller percentage of basis points. So that is really essentially the idea. We trade very much like an insurance company. We try to win every time we write a policy, and occasionally 1 out of 1,000 times, it's actually 16 out of 10,000 times, not 1 out of 1,000. I gave you the wrong odds. So we basically lose very rarely if we do this properly and if we have the odds in our favor. But of course, the critical component of this, and that's why it's so important for you to kind of watch me live in the room, because you really can't get the full appreciation and the nuance and the technique necessary to succeed every single day, every single time in this kind of a structure, unless you understand the proper sizing. And that's where we excel. We know bounce really needs to be, it's a strategy that requires incredibly small size to start with, so that you are not over levered if you ever have to go and call upon that level 7, level 8 in order to be able to resolve the trade. So the bottom line is we use very, very small size. Our starting target in terms of P&L is just to make 1 basis point. Now that's a very small amount of money. It's 1/100th of 1%, or literally $10 on a $100,000 account. But if we start that small, and if we hit that very, very rare stop out event, our total loss at that kind of a sizing is only 2.5%. So on a $100,000 account, we're only losing $2,500 if we trade this small. And our goal, which is what we try to achieve every single day, is to have at least 10 wins per day, which brings us to about 1/10 of 1%. And on a 250-day trading schedule, that's 25% a year. Now, that's the incredibly conservative approach to how we trade. There are many people in my room, including yours truly, who trades his own account, who trade much more aggressively than this. In other words, if I'm perfectly comfortable because I know the statistics and I know the actuarial tables and I understand the underlying thesis and analysis behind my trade, if I'm perfectly comfortable to say, if I'm going to get clipped, I'm willing to lose up to 25% of my account. So in other words, if I'm going to get stopped out, fine, I'll lose 25,000. If I'm willing to go to that level, then my ability to win every single trade goes from 1 basis points to 10 basis points, which is 1/10 of 1%, which means that if I'm doing 10 trades, I literally have a very, not just a good chance, but an absolute chance of making 1% per day. And if I'm making 1% per day at this very high, much more leverage, much more aggressive posture, I then have a very reasonable chance to turn 100,000 into 250,000, because I'm 1% per day at 250 trading days is 250%. And even if I lose twice that year, 25,000, and my total gross P&L is 250,000, I'm still up 200,000 on a $100,000 account, 10,000 to 20,000 if you're trading smaller sizes. Regardless, the point being is, if you're aggressive and you're perfectly comfortable understanding that yes, occasionally I might clip a quarter of my account, which is my trading account anyways, then you have a reasonable chance with this strategy to double your money in a year. Now, as I said, you don't have to take my word for it, because every single strategy, or every single live trading strategy I trade and I videotape it. It's all live on Vimeo, and some of these are on YouTube as well. It's just that I don't bother posting them on YouTube every time. But we have a Vimeo channel, and you could literally, it's free. You can subscribe to it. You can watch me on replay every single day, and you will see that every single day I make money in everything that we trade. I wish I could sometimes make the full 100 points. Sometimes you don't make it, but every day we grow the account bigger and bigger and bigger. I trade effectively 1 hour with all of our members at 9 a.m. New York time to 10 a.m. New York time. That's the New York Power Hour, and that's when we try to really galvanize and do the most of our trading that we can. Regardless of whether you want to trade for 1 hour, you want to trade for 5 hours, you want to trade for the full 24-hour day cycle. This is a really interesting approach because it's very unique in how it treats the market. It allows you to have multiple errors and still win at the end of the day. That's why I designed the strategy this way, because I felt that, the reason why most people lose in the markets is because they just held too high a standard. It's impossible to have a strategy that wins all the time. It's even impossible to have a strategy that wins 70% of the time, because you're going to run into these horrible losing streaks. And most people can't handle that. Now, this strategy essentially avoids all of these horrible losing streaks because it's actually allows you to take multiple chances at the same idea. And that approach essentially assures that if you're doing it properly, you're going to be winning at the end of the day. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I gave you a little bit of a flavor of what the bounce is all about. I hope you join me live trading even for a month and get a flavor for it. I'm happy to have you in my room. And I'll see you in the markets. Boris Schlossberg, over and out.